Hey everyone, Liz here from the Nail Hub. And I woke up this morning to being tagged in a really interesting post. I don't even want to give more views or any of that to this person because sometimes, especially these days on social media, I do think people post things because they know it's inflammatory and they're just wanting more comments, more activity on that post, because bad attention is just as good attention these days, especially when it comes to the algorithm on a lot of social media platforms. But it is an interesting topic, and it actually has something to do with other things in our industry that I was going to talk about as well. And that is centered around this fear-mongering type of way that a lot of people within our industry decide to go. Depending on whether you're a consumer, someone who's receiving services, maybe you're a DIYer who likes to do your own nails at home, maybe you're just getting into nails, maybe you're already a working nail technician. I'm sure you have come across this type of marketing where it's an attempt to try and freak you out about something specific and then get you to buy an alternative product to it. Now, it is a tricky situation because, especially when you get a following, you kind of automatically become what's considered a public figure of sorts. So I would definitely say that I have that responsibility, not because I'm uber famous or anything, but I do put content out there. I do have a substantial following. And so when I say things, there is that responsibility I take on to, hopefully other people feel this way, to say things in a truthful way, to make sure that I explain everything. And yes, it's going to come with my own bias because it's my own opinion, it's my own viewpoints on things. But at the same time, I always try to explain the why behind something and the fundamental reasoning behind something, instead of just telling you blanket, don't do this or do that or whatever. I try to actually always explain the why behind I'm saying something that I'm saying, to give you more ammunition, if you will, or more education about when you actually come across these types of topics, you're able to talk about it more intelligently, and you're also able to really make decisions for yourself based on logical reasoning, which is my favorite thing. So instead of, making an emotional decision based on a reaction to something that scares you, or maybe an emotional reaction to something that you want to rebel against because you're like, that's BS, I don't believe in that, I'm going to do it anyway. In either one of those situations, I feel like we're living in extremes, and I don't like that, because especially when we're talking about something complex like Russian manicuring, for example. Russian manicuring is definitely something that is one of those, my husband calls it the 3x5 card of popular opinion. And it's so true because, within our industry, we have these things that we always say, right? Like protect the professional and, safety, everything's about safety. And yes, those things are important. I don't want to make light of them, but at the same time, the way that they are marketed a lot of the time in our industry is so hypocritical. And it also minimizes and belittles the average nail industry participant, like nail technicians, for example, because it basically just says, don't touch the stove, it's hot, right? We know better than you do. And we're just going to tell you what to do, and you're not going to ask any questions. You're just going to follow along like a minion. And I hate that because it's so condescending, number one, that someone can't actually learn something or learn the how and why behind something. And yes, are there people in our industry that probably shouldn't be doing nails? Maybe they really don't care. Maybe they are hurting people. I don't think really any of that is intentional. I think a lot of it is just ignorance. But if, even if there are people who are intentionally doing it, whatever, that's their issue, and they're going to have their own issues to deal with. Don't punish or belittle or condescend the rest of the industry because there's a few negative outliers who aren't following, suit. And I hate when people jump on this because they try to basically round everybody up, tell everybody there's some huge issue going on, some huge safety issue usually. And then they're like, okay, we need to increase regulation. We need to stop this immediately. We need everyone to never do this again. And now buy my product that is an alternative to that thing. And it's like, all right, all you're doing is hurting the high performers. All you're doing is hurting the people that have just gotten out of nail school and already went through all of these hoops and already spent all of this money on trying to make sure they're set up for success, or someone who's already a seasoned nail technician. Now they've got to talk clients off the ledge. They've got to, revamp what they're doing. They've got to make sure that they reword things. I mean, it's so much work. And the legislation too. I mean, calling for more hours, making things illegal, making things this, that, and the other thing. It's like, are you really changing the behavior of the negative outliers? Are you really preventing those people from doing anything? No, you're actually just making it harder for everyone who's doing a good job to do a good job. And it absolutely just grinds my gears. I'm going to use the Family Guy reference from Peter. It's like, it just grinds my gears when that happens. And it's so true. It really does grind my gears because all I see is just people rustling things up again. And it's so funny that this post was about Russian manicuring. Because I'm like, have we not beat that horse dead enough? I mean, like, how dead can that horse possibly be? And I think this stuff crops up, and it's cyclical too. I mean, to me, it's like, first it's like chemicals, and then it's lamps, and then it's, about UV cancer, and then it's about fumes, and then it's about, allergies, and then it's about cutting your finger off, and Russian manicuring, and not cleaning, tools enough, and more hours for nail technicians, and all. It just keeps going around and around in this like wheel of death. And again, there are legitimate points to each one of those topics, okay? Some of those things are legitimate and they are things that we need to consider. Like the videos I've done on UV lights and how you really have to make sure you understand how UV light works to make sure that your products are curing properly so that you're mitigating a lot of that excess risk that can come from when you're not actually paying attention to that, right? And Russian manicuring too. If you don't know what you're doing, you can cut and hurt yourself. And if your tools aren't clean, you can definitely get infections and you can give other people infections. So there are important parts to that. But I think it's the way that it's being communicated. It's like, why can't we just actually explain, here's the risk, here's how you mitigate the risk, here are all the considerations you should have, here's how you do this properly, here's all the information about the topic so you can make the decision yourself about whether or not you want to actually include this type of service in your salon or in your business, or if you want to study this or if you want to get better at it. Here are educational opportunities to get better at it. Here are some experts you can leverage in order to, learn more about this topic. Because if there are whole parts of the world that do this successfully and do it better than we even do here in the States, then how can you poo-poo the entire 30,000 foot view of the topic and leverage it for your own marketing in a sinister way? So I call BS on that. I know, some of you tagged me in this particular post from this person. And I know you were frustrated about it. And I know you're probably dying of curiosity if you're watching this and you have no idea what I'm talking about. To be honest, it's really not important that you know who it is or what the post was about. It's just another stupid example of people leveraging fear-mongering to create a marketing opportunity. And they're not actually providing valid information. They're not actually providing all the how, what, why, when, all of that. They're just using it as a be afraid and do this instead. And I wish we didn't have so much of that in this industry, but we do. And so I will always be an advocate for you to have as much information as I can share about the who, why, what, when, where, all of those different questions, all of those fundamental pieces of anything that I know enough about to actually talk about. I will always advocate for you to make sure that I share that information in the most crystal clear way possible, that I always try to make sure my information is correct. And really, at the end of the day, I want to be perfectly clear that anything I share is geared towards you being able to actually be empowered to make your own decisions about a topic, okay? I have my own preferences. I have the things I like to do on nails. Yes, I like to do e-file manicuring. I have spent a lot of time being trained on it. I know a lot about it. I know a lot about e-files and bits and why we use certain things the way we use them and what they're for and how you can get really precise results out of when you know how to do that properly. But I also advocate for practicing on on yourself, for example. Don't practice on paying clients. Make sure you take some classes. Make sure you understand. Make sure you know the best practices for doing those things. Don't be using carbide bits on skin. All of those different tidbits that I've shared on my channel and I will continue to share, all of that stuff is geared towards you personally making the decision about what you would like to do, whether or not that freaks you out, whether or not you think you would be good at that. And I also think there's an element here that nobody really talks about, which is it's okay to specialize in something. It's okay to say, I'm not good at X, okay? So like, for example, I know people who would tell me, I'm just too heavy-handed to ever honestly be good at e-file manicuring. And I'm like, that's fair. That is actually really cool that you're that self-aware and you're honest with yourself about, hey, I just know I'm just too heavy-handed for something that delicate and that precise. I'm going to stick with the stuff that actually works well for me. And why get into that? And that's okay. I think because of the way social media has changed our world, and because of the way we all feel like we're competing against people, even though really nail technicians should never really feel like they're competing against other nail technicians, because remember, we aren't scalable businesses. We can only work on about 35 people a week, reasonably, if you want to have a couple days off. You're only able to work on maybe 70 people in your client book, maybe 100, maybe. So, I can't think of many places where you would honestly be competing against someone else and not be able to get 100 clients if you have all of your bells and whistles and ducks in a row. So I think we need to get off of this idea that we are missing out, the FOMO mentality, where it's like, oh, well, that person e-file manicures, and sometimes on social media, we're following a nail technician from a completely different part of the world or a completely different part of the country. And maybe you admire that person, maybe you look up to that person, maybe you get a little jealous of that person. All of those things are natural. It's just the competitive mentality. And I think there's something very motivating about that to make sure that you push yourself to learn more, do better, all of those things. But also don't allow it to start to eat away at you to the point that you think, I have to be everything for everybody. You really don't. You don't have to do every single service. You don't have to actually have every single skill on the planet. You don't have to do e-file manicuring if you don't like doing it. You don't ever have to use an e-file if you don't like using e-files. Now, I would always suggest take a class so that at least you have that education from an expert to see if you like doing it. Because I do think there's kind of that fear of the unknown if you have no information about it or no experience with it. But my point is that there really isn't any need for you to be just like me or them or whatever. And so if you know in your heart of hearts that you aren't into hand-painted nail art, that's cool. There are a ton of clients who hate nail art and just want one color, beautiful nails. There are also a lot of clients who don't like e-files being used on them, and there's a lot of nail techs that don't like using e-files. That's totally fine too. You don't ever have to use one if you don't want to. So I think there's space for everybody to specialize in this industry. I think actually specialization is one of the best and most often ignored ways to actually have a competitive advantage. I think too many people are trying to offer every single service and they become very generic as a business. And I think if you can actually specialize in something, then you're going to actually attract the type of clients that you want. And people are going to know what to expect from you. And people are going to seek you out because you are a specialist in something, okay? So I just wanted to put that out there that I do think that's also why people kind of choose one side of the fence or the other a lot of the time, is because it's usually like the people that are afraid of something are on this side of the fence and the people who are very pro are on this side of the fence. But there's a lot of people in the middle that really get confused by these extremes. And if you're someone that's in the middle and you're like, I don't really understand enough about this topic to have an opinion about it, that's okay too. I wish people would not use their power for fear-mongering. It really irritates me. And I see it not just in the nail industry, I see it all throughout everything that we come across. I wish there was more fundamental education. I wish there was more really breaking things down and demystifying things, but maybe I'm alone on that. I know there's a few people I've come across that are like that, but they're few and far between. So no big deal. I just wanted to get on here and talk about that because I do think that it's very prevalent. I want you to be hyper aware of it. I want you, even if you're seeing very pro, very anti type of propaganda, do a little bit of research, triangulate your information, do some digging, read, Google, watch some videos about it, see what other people are saying about it, listen to a lot of different opinions, and then I want you to make your own decision. Don't just latch on to the first thing that you hear, because really nobody has the answer except for you. You're the only person that really has the answer for what works for you. But being able to come to that answer, I think, requires a lot of research and a lot of digging and a lot of triangulation. So I always encourage people to do that, even if you love everything I say, please don't ever take anything, for granted. I always really like to encourage people to dig on their own, come up with their own ideas, verify, trust but verify. I always love to say that, trust but verify, right? You can trust what I say because I've built credibility with you. But at the end of the day, I always encourage people to verify what I say. And I'm also always doing that myself. I'm always going back and verifying things that I said wrong, or maybe I didn't have the right information at the time. Things are always evolving in our industry and in our world. So it's also something that we just have to constantly update and stay up to date on. But yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer that this happened. It's a bummer that someone this big is doing that. Knowing, the story of this person, I guess it doesn't really surprise me, but it's just obnoxious. So, anywho, I hope that you guys understand a little bit more about just this fear-mongering marketing tactic in our industry. I'll definitely talk more about it, as there's actually some stuff I want to get into. I'm going to be talking about the project I did last year in a future episode. I need to prepare some actual slides because I want to make it a little bit more official, and actually share some really meaningful data that I think is super cool. I'm a data junkie, so I always really love that. But I went through this experience basically this time last year is when I started it up, was my advanced DIYership program. And that was a really interesting experience because, again, people who were afraid of even just, literally the acronym DIY just lit some people on fire. And there was a lot of that cancel culture behavior happening. I went through hell and back last holidays season. I get why people are afraid, but it's completely misplaced fear. So I'm going to actually do a few episodes, I think, where I'm going to talk about that actual project, how it's moving forward, some really cool data about it. And also I'm going to do a couple episodes about how, professionals, I think, really need to address the DIY space. Because I think a lot of people have very incorrect opinions about DIYers. I think it's interesting that nail technicians aren't born nail technicians. Most of us started as DIYers, and yet a lot of us are very afraid of DIYers. So I'm going to talk about some of those things from a business perspective and hopefully give you some fundamental information that I think will quell some of those fears. And also, update you guys on how that's going. If you want to partake in that advanced DIY program, how you can, and I'll have some more details on that soon. So hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I really enjoy being back on the podcast. I feel so reinvigorated doing this. It just feels so good to just get back on and just be Liz again and talk and share some points with you and share my thoughts and Liz's stream of consciousness, if you will. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time. All right. Bye.